I'm going to start tonight's broadcast with a personal note. I do not have amnesia. I do not have short-term memory loss. I don't have any memory loss at all. I might have it someday, but I ain't got it right now. I will always remember how health care in this country came about. What happened today with the Supreme Court is monumental, but it also has to be reported correctly. And if it sounds partisan, I'm sorry, it's the facts. Who brought health care to this country? Who brought health care reform to this country in the middle of a rotten economy? It was the liberals. It was the Democrats. I don't know about you, but I remember reconciliation in the Senate. I remember the dogfight and the backbiting back and forth that took place in this country politically and the fight that took place for reform. And all I've heard today on all of the cables is, well, it sure is a good thing the Supreme Court ruled the way they did today because they really helped the Republicans because they didn't have Plan B. Really? I don't think the Republicans ever had Plan A, or did I miss that? Because you see, when the Republicans had the White House, the House, and the Senate, and we were taking on double-digit increases in health care costs in this country, the Republicans decided to do nothing about it. In fact, the Republicans loved the free market. They loved it when you got thrown off your health care. They didn't want to do anything about it. They had no problem with pre-existing conditions. And it wasn't until the Democrats, every candidate in the race in 2008, it was the Democrats who said, you know what? We have to do something about health care in this country. And what did we see? We saw the rise of the Tea Party. We saw the vilification of our first black president. We saw all kinds of stuff come down because of health care. But it was the Democrats who had the political guts in the middle of a rotten economy to say, you know what? We've got to do something for the American people. So what we have seen today, it is official. The three branches of government work for this country. The three branches of government have completely weighed in on health care reform in this country, and there are absolutes. There's right and there's wrong. And you know who's been on the wrong side of history for the last 5.5 years? It's the Republicans. And they're trying to wiggle out of it. And you know what? I'm just not going to let them do it. I know what happened, and I know how much this network, MSNBC, and this show, The Ed Show, dedicated to a full year of coverage of health care reform. Now, I say to the American people, including you Republicans out there who now have health care, this is a great day for America. We should all be celebrating. This is what democracy looks like, isn't it? We go through what they say over on Fox News, all the sausage making that has to take place. Well, you know what? I'm bellying up to the table and I'm eating good tonight because we got health care in this country. And you know what? It's only going to get better. So let's not forget the political fight that took place. Let's not forget the guts of Harry Reid. Let's not forget the guts of the Senate and the reconciliation, the process that we went through, and how some said, well, it's dead, we're not going to get health care. We did. We got it. And today, the justices ruled in a 6-3 vote, consumers, that's you, qualify for health care subsidies through both state and federal exchanges. And you know what? It ain't against the law. The suit against Obamacare, and that's exactly what it is, and they want to name it, and I'm proud to call it that. They claim that these federal subsidies, well, they're just illegal. We can't do that. Oh, yes, we can. Today's ruling means that over 6 million Americans will be able to keep their subsidies and continue on. If the court ruled against the Affordable Health Care Act, the consequences would have been devastating. This is what the Republicans wanted. They wanted it to go down today because they don't want to see this president or the Democrats generationally signature anything as big as health care reform. For the record, it's the progressive movement that has given us Social Security and protected it. It's the progressive movement that has given us Medicare, Medicaid and protected it. And now the next phase is health care, and the Republicans have had nothing to do with it. The law could have been completely torn apart if the Supreme Court had ruled differently today. This decision is a huge victory for President Obama. A conservative court just helped him write his legacy. Again, earlier today, the president addressed the ruling.
Today, after more than 50 votes in Congress to repeal or weaken this law, after a presidential election based in part on preserving or repealing this law, after multiple challenges to this law before the Supreme Court, the Affordable Care Act is here to stay. this morning, the court upheld a critical part of this law. This is not an abstract thing anymore. This is not a set of political talking points. This is reality. We can see how it is working. This law is working exactly as it's supposed to. In many ways, this law is working better than we expected it to. For all the misinformation campaigns, all the doomsday predictions, all the talk of death panels and job destruction, for all the repeal attempts, this law is now helping tens of millions of Americans. And they've told me that it has changed their lives for the better.
Well, the majority opinion was written by Chief Justice John Roberts, who was appointed by George W. Bush. He was joined by Justices Sotomayor, Kagan, Ginsburg, Breyer, and Kennedy. And Roberts wrote in the last paragraph of his opinion, said, quote, Congress passed the Affordable Care Act to improve health insurance markets, not to destroy them. If at all possible, we must interpret the act in a way that is consistent with former and avoids the latter. You know, there's a guy who said in his confirmation hearings that he was going to call balls and strikes. I remember that. Today he called balls and strikes. Roberts realizes that the health insurance industry is making money hand over fist. It's good for America. He came to the conclusion that if you're making money, you're not hindering the markets. Everybody can win. It's a win for consumers. It's a win for the healthcare industry and the healthcare companies. Conservative Justices Scalia, Alito, and Thomas, well, they didn't like it. They wrote a scathing dissenting opinion. Justice Scalia mentioned several times the court has had to rule on Obamacare. Several times he wrote, we should just start calling this law SCOTUS care. You know, Justice Scalia, call it whatever you want. The American people have got it, and that's the only thing that matters. Republicans were not pleased with the Obamacare being upheld today. Behind closed doors, they got to be going nuts. Republicans, led by Speaker John Boehner, they've tried to repeal Obamacare roughly 60 times. Let's not forget that. It's been a massive waste of taxpayer time and effort. Today marked a major defeat for House Republicans, and John Boehner had this to say.
The law is broken. It's raising costs for American families. It's raising costs for small businesses. And it's just fundamentally broken. And we're going to continue our efforts to do everything we can to put the American people back in charge of their own health care and not the federal government.
So the law is broken according to Boehner. Mr. Boehner, I don't mean this as a personal shot, but it is a personal experience. After the health care law, my wife got cancer, and they couldn't drop her. And I'm not so sure that they wouldn't if the law hadn't been passed. Boehner also issued a statement today saying, we will continue our efforts to repeal the law and replace it. Have at it, dude. Have at it. Jeb Bush also weighed in today. He released this video after the ruling. You know what? I don't think there's any Democrats out there that would disagree with that. The only problem is, Mr. Bush, is your party and you are late to the game. Republicans need to let this go, though, don't they? Obamacare is the law of the land. Congress voted for it. The Supreme Court, the conservatives on the court, they tried to stop it, couldn't do it, upheld it 2 times. The people voted for it in the 2012 when the re-election of President Barack Obama. So I think today's ruling opens the door for, hey, let's go to round 2. Let's do more expansion. This really destroys everything the House has done when it comes to repealing Obamacare. The fact that it's a 6-3 ruling is a real statement, and it underscores how John Boehner has been wasting his time repealing health care when he could have been focusing on the economy and jobs, and he didn't do that either. I will never forget the election cycle when some of the Democrats ran away from Obamacare because it wasn't popular. Well, is it now? Do the Democrats now have the guts to stand up and say, you know what, we did the right thing and we're going to make it better, and we're going to reach across the aisle and ask the Republicans if they'd like to come along with us? Get your cell phones out. I want to know what you think. Tonight's question: are Republicans wasting their time by trying to repeal Obamacare after today's ruling? Go to pulse.msnbc.com/ed to cast your vote. We'll bring you the results right after this segment. Okay, let me bring in Howard Dean, former governor of Vermont. Mike Papantonio, Ring of Fire radio host, is with us tonight, and also Wendell Potter, senior analyst for the Center of Public Integrity. And as I started this broadcast tonight, I said I did not have amnesia, but I want all of you out there to know that if I had, Obamacare would cover that too. So that's pretty good, isn't it? All right, Governor Dean, how big a day is it? Put it into summation what you think.
The president's had a huge day and a huge week. Although many progressives don't agree, he got the Trans-Pacific Trade Agreement through, and now he's got Obamacare pretty much nailed down. They can pick around the edges on the Republican side if they want to, but this is a done deal. And one of the first things that's going to happen, which is very exciting, is I predict now that more Republican governors are going to start allowing their citizens to have health insurance by allowing Medicaid expansions in their states. If they don't, they're just taking money out of their own hospital budgets. And I think the game is over as far as Obamacare goes. It is the law of the land. It's a huge victory for this president. He's had an unbelievable week, maybe the best of his presidency.
Well, Governor Dean, let me ask you, do you think that going after Obamacare now for the Republicans is nothing but a political graveyard? I mean, I think it's interesting that you think that this is going to really open it up to other states, and maybe they'll get some political pressure to do the right thing. What do you think?
Well, I do think they are going to, and I'd like to hear what Wendell says about this, because he's certainly a tremendous expert in this area. But I absolutely think that the Republicans, governors who've denied their coverage to their people, not only are denying coverage to poor people in their states or working people in their states, but they're also really sticking it to their hospitals who are not getting compensated for people who need care and can't pay for it. That's a no-brainer for any reasonable, smart governor on either side of the aisle. And at this point, Republicans have had a history of putting their politics ahead of their people, and that can't happen in a Republican primary. Scott Walker's going to get fried if he should get the nomination as a governor who denied all his people health insurance. And so I think we're done here. Obamacare is no longer a liability for Democrats. If it ever was, it's now a positive, and it's going to have a big effect in the presidential election.
Mr. Potter, what does this ruling mean for the healthcare industry?
It means some stability for one thing. The insurance industry was obviously very, very concerned about this. I'm sure that they were among the most relieved with this ruling. But so were the hospitals, as Governor Dean said. And in particular, in the states that have not expanded Medicaid yet, it's a very big deal. They've been losing money, and they have political power and political clout in every state. And I think you'll start seeing some changes, as Governor Dean suggested. But it obviously is a very big deal, it goes without saying, to not only those people who stood to lose their subsidies, but to everybody who buys insurance through the individual market. This really could have devastated those markets had it gone the other way.
No doubt. And Mr. Potter, what do you think round two is? What's round two going to look like? What's the next phase?
You know, I really think progressives should be emboldened to start trying to move us toward universal coverage. The Affordable Care Act gets us, along the road toward that goal. But it doesn't get us far enough. It does some good work to control costs, but not as much. I think the business leaders in this country also need to start assessing what value do insurance companies really bring to our healthcare system. Are they really able to control healthcare costs? If not, I think the business community should take a look at really taking a leadership position in moving us to the next, where we need to go from here.
Mike Papantonio, what's the legal take here? What's the legal ramifications of this ruling? What did it all come down to as you see it?
Well, the media had a hard time trying to convey what the dispute was about, but in its distilled terms, it was very simple. Interpretation was argued about ambiguity. Did the term state mean an individual state such as Alabama or Mississippi, or did state as a term of, did it encompass the entire federal system? That's where this all started, to show you how ridiculous this was to begin with. It was absolutely absurd. Did every individual state first have to find its own state insurance infrastructure infrastructure in order to benefit from subsidies. So when people looked at this from the very outset, they said, we don't know how this court's going to get here. We don't know how they're going to end this. As a matter of fact, I was surprised because we have to look at the history of this court. It's the history of that gave us Citizens United. They gave us the Destruction of Voting Rights Act. Every time the GOP has asked for something where it is corporations, Wall Street against the average consumer, they have lined up for the GOP. So this was a surprise. You know it's bad, Ed, when you have Scalia using terms that sounded like a word salad. He described it as jiggery pokery. Now, I've been practicing law a long time, and I've never seen such words in an opinion this important. He called it pure applesauce. That shows you how crazy the fringe right has attacked this thing. And you know the good news, Ed? The private meetings that Scalia and Thomas had with the Koch brothers, it didn't pay off for the fringe right. That's good news.
Howard Dean, Mike Papantonio, Wendell Potter, great to have you with us tonight on this historic day for American consumers.